The email landed in her inbox a few days before Christmas, an invitation to her company's annual New Year's Eve party. Karen forwarded it to me with a cheerful note. "They're letting us bring our partners this year. It'll be fun. Please say yes." I stared at the message for a few moments, debating. Work parties weren't exactly my idea of a good time, but Karen seemed genuinely excited about it. Lately, she'd been so stressed about everything. Work, our efforts to have a baby, the strain of our busy schedules. Maybe a night out would help us both unwind. "Sure, why not?" I replied, keeping it light. She sent back a flurry of excited emojis, which made me smile. I loved that about her, the way she could find joy in the smallest things. After 5 years of marriage, her enthusiasm was one of the things I treasured most about her. The night of the party arrived, and we were running late. Karen looked stunning in a crimson dress that hugged her curves just right. Her dark hair swept up in a way that made her neck look impossibly elegant. I watched her in the mirror as she applied the last touches of lipstick, her smile radiant, her eyes sparkling. "You look incredible," I said. She laughed and swatted my arm playfully. "Flattery will get you everywhere. Now, come on. We're going to be late." The venue was an upscale hotel downtown, all glittering chandeliers and sleek modern decor. As we stepped inside, Karen gripped my arm tightly, her excitement palpable. "There's Mr. Bennett," she whispered, nodding toward a tall man with salt and pepper hair who stood near the bar. Her boss. I'd heard about him often enough, mostly good things. He was apparently well-respected, charismatic, and demanding in equal measure. Karen guided us over to say hello. Mr. Bennett greeted her with a warm smile and an extended hand. When he turned to me, his handshake was firm, his smile polite but distant. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was sizing me up, but I brushed it off. As the night went on, the party turned out to be more enjoyable than I'd anticipated. The food was excellent, the drinks flowed freely, and Karen seemed happier than I'd seen her in weeks. She mingled effortlessly with her coworkers, her laughter ringing out above the din of the party. I stayed close but gave her space, chatting with a few of the other partners and nursing a glass of whiskey. At one point, I caught sight of her and Mr. Bennett at the bar, their heads bent close together. It didn't bother me. Karen had always been friendly, and I trusted her. But something about the way he leaned in, the way his hand brushed her arm as he spoke, sent a flicker of unease through me. I shook it off. Paranoia wasn't my style, and tonight was supposed to be fun. As midnight approached, the energy in the room shifted. The lights dimmed, and everyone began gathering near the dance floor for the countdown. Karen found me and slipped her arms around my waist, her cheeks flushed from champagne. "Having a good time?" she asked, her voice warm and soft. "Better than I expected," I admitted, smiling down at her. She leaned up to kiss me, and for a moment, it felt like nothing else in the world mattered. When the clock struck 12, we kissed again, and the room erupted into cheers. Karen pulled me onto the dance floor, and we laughed as we stumbled through the steps of a song neither of us knew. I held her close, marveling at how lucky I was. Whatever stresses we faced them together. That was what mattered. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the memory of that brief moment at the bar. Her and Bennett, heads close, his hand lingering just a fraction too long. I ignored it. This was our night, and nothing would ruin it. Nothing, I thought, until later. The party was winding down, and Karen was a blur of motion, her laughter and gestures larger than life. Champagne had loosened her in ways I hadn't seen in months, and she moved from conversation to conversation, her cheeks flushed and her eyes sparkling. I admired her from a distance, sipping on my whiskey and feeling the faint buzz of the alcohol in my veins. She was so full of life, so magnetic, that it felt like I was watching someone else entirely. A version of Karen that belonged more to the world than to me. It wasn't long before the crowd began to thin. People were leaving in pairs, slipping into the cool night air as the glow of midnight faded. I stayed in the ballroom, talking briefly to one or two people, but I kept an eye out for Karen. When I realized I hadn't seen her in a while, an unsettling feeling began to bloom in my chest. She'd been tipsy, no doubt about that, but she wasn't careless. She would have told me where she was going. I walked through the ballroom, scanning the clusters of remaining guests. She wasn't at the bar. She wasn't on the dance floor. The unease began to sharpen into something more tangible. One of her co-workers mentioned she'd gone toward the restrooms, and I nodded in acknowledgement, though my stomach tightened further. I headed that way, weaving through the dimly lit hallway. As I approached, I heard voices. A man's voice, low and firm, followed by Karen's familiar tone, softer but edged with something that didn't sit right. Her words were slurred, punctuated with laughter that felt too intimate, too vulnerable. My pulse quickened as I stepped closer. Then, through the gap in the door to the men's restroom, I saw them. Time seemed to splinter into jagged pieces as the scene unfolded. Karen's dress was pushed up around her hips, her bare legs wrapped loosely around Mr. Bennett. His hands gripped her thighs, his head buried against her neck. The two of them moved together with a frantic urgency that obliterated any doubt about what I was witnessing. I felt something inside me shatter, a silent scream reverberating through my skull. My vision blurred at the edges, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was as if my body had locked itself in place, forcing me to absorb every sordid detail. Karen's head tilted back, her eyes half closed in a haze of drunken pleasure. It was only when I stepped fully into the room that she noticed me. Her entire body jolted, her legs slipping from around him as her eyes went wide with shock. Mr. Bennett turned slowly, his expression first blank, then filled with something that might have been shame or just annoyance at being caught. I don't know how long I stood there, rooted to the floor, staring at the two of them as they fumbled to compose themselves. Karen pulled her dress down with trembling hands, her face pale and streaked with sudden tears. Bennett stepped away, straightening his clothes and glancing at me with an expression I couldn't read. The rush of emotions hit me all at once. Rage, betrayal, disgust, disbelief. My chest heaved with the force of it, my hands curling into fists at my sides. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to lash out in a way that would make them feel even a fraction of the pain that was tearing through me. But I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Karen said something. Her lips moved, and I could see her mouth forming words, but I didn't hear them. The blood roared in my ears, drowning out everything but the image of her and Bennett, locked together in a moment I could never unsee. I turned and walked out, my footsteps echoing loudly in the hallway. Karen's voice followed me, pleading, sobbing, but I didn't stop, couldn't. The weight of it all pressed down on me, suffocating, and I needed to escape before it crushed me completely. By the time I reached the street, the freezing air hit my face like a slap, but it did nothing to numb the searing pain in my chest. I hailed a cab with a trembling hand, my mind already racing ahead to what came next. I couldn't go back to her. I wouldn't. Whatever we'd built over the last 5 years, whatever dreams we'd shared, it was gone now, torn apart in a moment of reckless betrayal. As the cab pulled away from the hotel, tears burned hot and bitter down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. Let them fall, I thought. Let it all fall. The house was dark when I got home, the kind of stillness that seeps into your bones. It felt alien, as though I were stepping into someone else's life. I turned on the lights, one by one, but they only highlighted the emptiness. The photos on the walls, the small mementos of our life together, suddenly seemed hollow. Every frame, every knickknack, every carefully chosen piece of decor now felt like a lie. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing, the events of the night playing on a loop in my mind. I couldn't stop seeing her, couldn't stop hearing the muffled sounds that confirmed everything I'd never wanted to believe possible. My stomach churned as the memory of it all clawed its way back to the surface. The betrayal, the humiliation, the rage. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, the pain grounding me in a way nothing else could. I felt sick, my chest heaving with the weight of emotions I didn't know how to name. I wanted to scream, to destroy something, to purge the venomous ache that was spreading through me. Instead, I sat there frozen, as the hours crept by. Sometime after 3 a.m., I heard the faint rattle of keys in the lock. The door opened, and Karen stepped inside, her movements hesitant, as if she were afraid to breathe too loudly. Her makeup was smudged, her dress wrinkled, and her eyes were red-rimmed, though she tried to meet mine with a weak smile. "James," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood up, the motion abrupt and sharp. My chest felt like it might explode from the sheer pressure building inside it. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice low and trembling. "You have nothing to say that I want to hear." She flinched, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then the image of her with Bennett slammed into me again, and the flicker of sympathy turned to ash. Karen sank onto the arm of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked so small, so fragile, but I couldn't let that soften me. Not now. Not after what she'd done. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "Let me explain." I cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Explain? Explain what? That you decided to screw your boss at a party I was invited to? That you didn't care enough about me, about us, to stop yourself? There's nothing you can say, Karen. Nothing." Her tears came then, falling fast and hot down her cheeks as she choked on her sobs. "I was drunk, James. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "Drunk? That's your excuse? You don't accidentally end up in that position, Karen. You don't accidentally betray your husband." She sobbed harder, her words coming in broken fragments. "I love you. I'm so sorry. Please, I'll do anything to make this right." I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. I turned away, my hands gripping the back of the couch so tightly I thought the wood might splinter. "Make this right," I muttered. "You think you can make this right? How, Karen? Tell me how, because I can't think of a single way." The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear her crying, hear the quiet hitch in her breath as she struggled to find words. But I didn't care. Couldn't. Finally, I turned back to her, the weight of my decision settling like a stone in my gut. "I'm done. This marriage, this life we built, it's over. I can't come back from this, Karen. I won't." Her head shot up, her tear-streaked face filled with panic. "No, James, no. Please don't say that. Don't do this." But I was already walking toward the bedroom, the finality of my words hanging in the air behind me. "I'll sleep on the couch tonight. Tomorrow I'll start looking for a place to stay. We're done, Karen. There's nothing left to say." I closed the door to the bedroom behind me, but her muffled cries seeped through the walls. I leaned against the door, my legs threatening to give out as the exhaustion and heartbreak finally consumed me. I slid to the floor, my head in my hands, and let the tears come. It was the first time I'd cried in years, and I hated myself for it. But I couldn't stop. The pain was too raw, too real. And in that moment, I realized just how much I had lost. The next morning felt surreal, like waking up in a house that wasn't my own. The sun streamed through the windows, mocking the heaviness that sat in my chest. I hadn't slept much. The couch offered little comfort, and the weight of what had happened made rest impossible. Karen was already awake. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had gone cold. She looked as broken as I felt, her face pale and swollen from crying. Neither of us said anything at first. The silence was oppressive, a wall neither of us had the strength to climb. I poured myself a cup of coffee, more out of routine than need. As I stood at the counter, I tried to sort through the whirlwind in my mind. Part of me wanted to scream at her again, to let her feel the full force of my anger and pain. Another part just wanted to leave, to walk out the door and never look back. Karen finally broke the silence, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "I need to tell you something." I didn't respond, didn't even look at her. I didn't trust myself to speak without my emotions taking over. She hesitated, the seconds dragging out until I turned to face her. There was something in her expression, fear, desperation, that made my stomach tighten. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling. For a moment, her words didn't register. They hung in the air, heavy and unreal, like a foreign language I couldn't comprehend. Then, slowly, their meaning sank in, and my grip on the coffee mug tightened until my knuckles turned white. Pregnant. A word I had longed to hear for years. A dream we had chased together through hope and heartbreak. And now, of all times, of all circumstances, she chose this moment to tell me. I set the mug down carefully, afraid I might throw it otherwise. Is it mine? The question came out cold, clipped, and I hated myself for having to ask it. Her eyes widened, fresh tears spilling over. Of course it's yours, James. I swear, it's yours. I studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. Her words felt like they were clawing at me, a mix of relief and fury twisting in my chest. I wanted to believe her, but the betrayal was still too raw, too immediate. Karen reached out, her hands trembling. I found out a few days ago. I didn't know how to tell you. And then last night. Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. I ruined everything. Her words were true. She had ruined everything. And yet this revelation complicated everything in a way I hadn't anticipated. A child, our child, changed the equation. It wasn't just about her and me anymore. There was someone else to consider, someone innocent and helpless, someone who didn't ask to be brought into this chaos. I felt sick, the coffee turning to acid in my stomach. My mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, none of them ending in the kind of life I had once imagined for us. But how could I walk away now? How could I leave when there was a child involved? I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice low and thick with emotion. But if this baby is mine, I'll be here for them. I won't abandon my child. Karen looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. She nodded, her lips trembling as she tried to form words. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore, so I left the kitchen, retreating to the bedroom that still smelled faintly of her perfume. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, and I realized there was no clean way out of this. My life, my marriage, everything I thought I knew, it was all broken. And yet, in the midst of the wreckage, there was a flicker of something new, something fragile and uncertain. A child. My child. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Whatever came next, it would never be the same. The weeks that followed were a blur, a slow crawl through a maze of pain, anger, and confusion. Karen and I barely spoke unless it was about the baby. Every interaction felt like walking on broken glass, each word weighed down by everything unspoken. I had moved into the guest bedroom, unable to bring myself to share a bed with her. The distance between us was physical and emotional, an endless chasm I couldn't imagine crossing. I threw myself into work, anything to keep my mind from lingering on what she'd done. But no matter how much I tried to focus on spreadsheets and emails, the memories crept in, the betrayal, the humiliation, the moment everything shattered. And then, inevitably, the new memory of her tearful confession about the pregnancy would follow. It was a vicious cycle, one I couldn't escape. Karen, for her part, tried. She apologized over and over, in words, in gestures, in quiet moments where she looked at me as if she were waiting for a verdict. She promised it was a mistake, a drunken lapse in judgment, that it meant nothing. But none of that mattered to me. What she'd done wasn't something I could easily forgive, if at all. Still, there was the baby. The first ultrasound was the turning point. Karen had asked me to come, her voice trembling with uncertainty. I had almost refused, the bitterness still fresh in my chest. But then I thought of the child, our child, and I went. Sitting in that sterile room, I kept my distance from Karen, my arms crossed and my jaw clenched. The technician smiled politely, oblivious to the storm brewing between us. When the grainy image appeared on the screen and the sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, something inside me shifted. It was faint, barely perceptible, but it was there. A tiny, fragile reminder that this wasn't just about Karen and me anymore. It was about them. About this new life that hadn't asked for any of this chaos but was coming into it regardless. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat, as the reality of it settled over me. Afterward, we rode home in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Karen finally broke it as we pulled into the driveway. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her hands twisting in her lap. I nodded but said nothing, heading inside without waiting for her. The truth was, I didn't know how to feel. Seeing the ultrasound had stirred something in me, but it hadn't erased the hurt. It hadn't made her betrayal disappear. Months passed and the baby grew. I stayed, if only for the child. I went to the doctor's appointments, painted the nursery, and helped Karen set up the crib. But there was a wall between us that neither of us could breach. At night, I lay awake in the guest room, wondering if we could ever rebuild what we had, or if we should even try. Karen kept trying, though. She wrote me letters, long and heartfelt, detailing her regret and her love for me. She left notes on my pillow, slipped them into my work bag, folded them into the pages of books she knew I was reading. I read every one, though I never told her. I didn't know what to say, or if I even wanted to say anything. The day our baby was born was the first time I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd fallen in love with in years. She was radiant despite the exhaustion, her face glowing as she held our daughter for the first time. The anger that had consumed me for so long felt muted in that moment, overshadowed by the tiny, perfect life we'd brought into the world. When Karen handed her to me, I hesitated. But then I looked down at my daughter, our daughter, and felt something I hadn't expected: hope. It was faint, fragile, and laced with doubt, but it was there. That night, as Karen slept in the hospital bed, I sat in the corner of the room, holding our baby and watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about forgiveness, not for Karen's sake, but for mine, for the sake of the life we'd created. The road ahead wasn't clear, and I didn't know if I'd ever love her the way I once had. But as I looked at our daughter, I knew one thing: I would try. For her, for us, for the fragile new beginning we'd been given.